Karen, the HOA president, completely lost her composure when I settled my HOA fine using coins. More than a year ago, I found myself entangled in a frustrating conflict with my homeowners association, HOA. It all began when the president of the HOA, whom we shall refer to as Karen, despite it not being her actual name, imposed a staggering $2,100 in fines on me for parking a vehicle they had not sanctioned, my Tesla Model X, in my own driveway. However, an unexpected turn of events unfolded that caught both Karen and the HOA off guard. Before we get started, please share your location with us today. If you're just joining us, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to become part of our expanding community. The regulations were utterly absurd. Picture this. I was prohibited from parking my own electric car in the driveway of the house I owned. The sole appropriate location for it was the garage, and even then, the garage door needed to remain closed. Yet another ridiculous regulation on their never-ending roster of methods to dictate our existence. Are you kidding me? This wasn't just an old, rusted work truck or a clunker languishing outside, dripping oil all over the driveway. It was a pristine, gleaming vehicle, the sort that captures attention effortlessly. My efforts were significant to make this happen, and it represented so much more than just a vehicle. It represented the culmination of my efforts. Yet here they stood, asserting that it had no place in my own driveway, right in front of my lovely home. I'm unable to park my Tesla in the driveway of my lovely home, which resulted in a fine. Upon receiving the fine, I felt a surge of anger. This was the breaking point. I gazed at that letter and pondered, you know what? That's it, I've had it. I refused to yield over something so completely absurd. Thus, I realized action was necessary to push back. My Tesla transcended mere transportation. It was a bold declaration. A stylish, innovative device that drew attention and ignited discussions wherever I appeared. I didn't purchase it to conform. I acquired it because I had deserved the opportunity to be noticed. Each curve, each detail, each silent mile it traveled stood as a tribute to my achievements and the countless hours I had dedicated to reach this point. As I took it home for the first time, a sense of invincibility washed over me. It represented more than just transportation. It was a testament to my achievements. Individuals dedicate their entire existence to envisioning something that boldly proclaims, I exist, and I have come. The Tesla represented that for me. It transcended mere practicality or environmental concerns, although those aspects were certainly a pleasant addition. It was about possessing something that exuded brilliance, much like I aspired to. When the HOA informed me that parking in my own driveway was off limits, and had the nerve to claim it didn't align with their so-called neighborhood standards, I was absolutely furious. It was quite amusing, to be honest. It seemed absurd that a car valued at more than half the houses in the area was deemed unsuitable, while a dilapidated rust bucket, dripping oil onto the pavement, was perfectly acceptable. In that moment, I realized this transcended mere regulations. This was a matter of dominance, manipulation, and an individual's envy disguised as governance. It wasn't merely a penalty for parking my vehicle. They were attempting to erode the very foundations of my beliefs. I certainly wasn't going to overlook that. The penalties accumulated rapidly as the HOA asserted that I breached their regulations for 21 straight days. They opted to impose the highest fine of $100 each day for 21 supposed infractions. Nevertheless, they failed to present any solid evidence. The evidence of my alleged default consisted of a collection of poorly taken photos of my Tesla, captured from within another vehicle, lacking timestamps or any clear documentation. I attempted to engage in a discussion with the HOA president, who was quite demanding. I attempted to clarify the reasons my Tesla required a spot in the driveway. My garage was no longer a place for parking. It had been transformed into a DIY workshop, a haven where I dedicated countless hours to crafting custom furniture as a beloved hobby. It was a place where I dedicated countless hours to unwind, clear my thoughts, and immerse myself in creative endeavors that provided a deep sense of tranquility and satisfaction. Storing my Tesla in the garage would have required taking apart everything, which simply wasn't practical. Yet, Karen remained indifferent. She showed no inclination to grasp my perspective. The struggle with the HOA had repercussions beyond my own experience, coursed through every member of my family. Initially, my partner made an effort to remain hopeful, comforting me with the belief that we would discover a resolution. From the very start, my partner has been my unwavering support. In my moment of frustration, she emerged as the calm presence, encouraging me to pause, breathe deeply, and reflect on the situation. My partner not only heard my frustrations about the ridiculous regulations and the unjust penalties, she genuinely grasped the significance it held for me. Whenever I found myself questioning my abilities, she was there, offering gentle words of encouragement or a comforting touch on my shoulder. Yet, as the penalties continued to accumulate and the correspondence from the HOA became increasingly aggressive, the pressure began to weigh heavily. In the stillness of the night, with the house enveloped in silence and all asleep, I would often find myself in the kitchen, gazing at the piles of HOA letters resting on the counter. Uncertainty slinked in like a dark silhouette. Was this struggle worthwhile? It was utterly depleting, sapping my emotional and mental energy. I found myself pondering whether I was squandering my efforts fighting against something so profoundly rooted. The penalties continued to accumulate, and the responses from the HOA to my emails grew more and more patronizing. They weren't merely overlooking my concerns. They were rejecting them entirely. There were times I felt like surrendering, to put the house on the market and escape the suffocating hold of Karen's regulations. Yet, whenever I pondered it, my thoughts drifted to my family. What sort of message would I convey to my children if I chose to retreat? The Tesla, positioned with confidence in the driveway, was more than merely a vehicle. I had vowed to uphold what truly mattered to me. To yield would mean surrendering my autonomy to the HOA, and that was a reality I simply could not embrace. Even when the circumstances began to feel daunting, my partner remained steadfast. Instead, she brought to mind the purpose behind our actions, emphasizing that it was not solely for my benefit, but for our family and the principles we aimed to cherish. Her faith in me, in us, changed everything. This battle was not solely mine. It belonged to us, and the realization that I wasn't solitary fueled my determination to persevere. The children, as well, sensed the underlying tension. Our eldest would inquire why we couldn't leave the car outside, and it pained me to witness the confusion and frustration on his and his younger sister's faces. They were perplexed by how something so straightforward had escalated into such a significant issue. I felt a conflict within me, caught between the desire to protect them from the harsh realities and the need to instill in them the value of advocating for what is just. In the midst of the challenges, we found glimmers of unity that propelled us forward. One evening, following a notably exasperating email exchange with the HOA, my partner pulled out a notepad and began to brainstorm ideas for how we could make an impactful statement. "If they want to complicate things, let's demonstrate our resolve," she declared. The concept of coin payment emerged in that manner. We based our decision on the Federal Reserve's guideline that coins and currency serve as legal tender for debts, concluding that coins would be our chosen method of payment. Feeling exasperated and with limited choices, I found motivation in my partner and resolved to take action in a manner that would leave a lasting impression on my HOA president. It was at that moment we decided to settle the $2,100 fine solely with coins, quarters, dimes, nickels, and predominantly pennies. We were resolute in our mission, and fortunately, my partner and I were bolstered by the encouragement of friends and cherished ones. It had transcended beyond my personal struggle. It evolved into a challenge we faced as a united family. Prior to handing over the payment in coins, I engaged in a series of email exchanges with my HOA. Navigating the steps to settle the fine proved to be just as exasperating. I clarified to them that I am unable to make a payment through wire transfer, and I also cannot pay with a check. Following a bit of negotiation, the HOA president ultimately conceded, stating, "Very well, you may proceed with a cash payment." Next, the second obstacle emerged. The president of the HOA was adamant about cash payments, whereas another representative asserted that only checks were accepted. The situation devolved into a maddening exchange, with both parties appearing unable to reach a consensus on their established guidelines. After what seemed like an interminable discussion, I was ultimately granted permission to pay in cash. Once I received the confirmation to pay in cash, I embarked on a quest to gather the coins. Required extensive planning. I explored numerous banks, gathering as many coins as possible. The moment we began to gather the coins seemed to signal the dawn of an exciting new chapter. A subtle defiance in the face of the HOA's absurdity. Just as I was starting to unpack the first roll of pennies, my inquisitive 9-year-old approached me. "What are you up to, Dad?" they inquired, eyebrows arched at the gleaming heap of copper resting on the kitchen table. "I'm preparing to pay Karen," I remarked, stressing the name with dramatic contempt. "She requested her money, so I'm providing it to her. Each, alone, cent." Their eyes sparkled with joy. "Among all these coins," they inquired, extending their hand towards a roll of quarters. "How may I assist you?" In an instant, my children were settled at the table, brimming with enthusiasm to participate. My youngest, only 6 years old, snatched a roll of dimes and promptly ripped it open. Coins strewn across the surface, producing a melodic clink as they make contact with the hardwood floor. "My apologies." They laughed softly, slipping beneath the table to gather the stray dimes. My partner entered, surveyed the disarray, and erupted into laughter. "Is this really how we're choosing to spend our Saturday?" they inquired, sleeves already rolled up, swiftly transformed into a collective endeavor. My eldest began counting pennies with a focused determination, arranging them into tidy stacks. "Do you believe this will suffice for a single bucket?" they inquired, narrowing their eyes at their creation. In the meantime, my youngest was captivated by the art of stacking quarters into towering structures, only to send them crashing down with a victorious shout. With each tower that collapsed, the room erupted in a symphony of laughter. Naturally, not everything unfolded without a hitch. At a certain moment, we came to the understanding that the buckets were weighing more than we had expected. My partner attempted to lift one and let out a groan. "This is heavier than the children," they gasped, shaking their head in disbelief. "How are we supposed to fit these into the car?" I lifted my gaze from the mound of nickels, a sly grin spreading across my lips. "We will find a way to make it happen," I declared with assurance. "If Karen intends to complicate matters, we certainly won't simplify things for her." By the time we reached the midpoint, the kitchen resembled a tiny bank vault. Coins scattered across the table, cluttered the counters, and somehow found their way into the kids' hair. My partner took a moment to snap a photo, freezing the delightful chaos and sense of togetherness. "This," they proclaimed, "is a moment destined to be etched in memory." The notion of settling the fine with coins originated as a jest, a means to satirize the ridiculousness of their regulations. Yet, as the concept evolved, it transformed into something far greater. The coins represented each small struggle against oppression, each instance where someone decided to stand up against unjust authority. They served as a poignant reminder that even the tiniest acts of rebellion could hold significant meaning. As my family and I filled those heavy buckets, it dawned on me that this was more than merely complicating Karen's life. It was a bold defiance against a structure that insisted on uniformity, sacrificing the essence of uniqueness. Every coin symbolized my defiance against their antiquated standards, my determination to embrace life according to my own rules. As the last bucket was closed, it resembled the act of affirming a newfound freedom. This transcended mere payment. It was a declaration, a note to Karen, the HOA, and all others who believed they could control my way of living. I had no intention of yielding. As the evening wore on, fatigue started to creep in, yet an unspoken resolve lingered in the atmosphere. My youngest nestled into a chair, deep in slumber, while my eldest persevered, determined to see it through until the last roll was unveiled. As the final coin was counted and the last bucket sealed, we took a moment to reflect on our efforts, appreciating the fruits of our labor. 7 buckets, overflowing, each tipping the scales at more than 50 pounds. The scene was absurd, yet it resonated with a sense of triumph. "Text, this is it," I declared, gazing at my family. "This is how we assert our presence." My partner beamed and playfully tousled the kids' hair. This moment will forever be etched in our memories, they declared, and I understood their truth. The matter extended beyond mere coins or the confrontation with the HOA. It was about uniting as a family, championing what truly counts, and teaching our children that occasionally, the most ridiculous struggles are the ones that deserve our effort. It transcended the mere presence of the Tesla. It was about instilling in them the importance of perseverance, of holding on when something genuinely counts. The journey was long and draining, yet it filled me with a profound sense of fulfillment, aware of the discomfort it would cause Karen. I aimed to convey a strong statement regarding the ridiculousness of their regulations, and this preparation seemed like the ideal approach to achieve that. In contemplating the situation, I found myself drawn to the broader context. My family and I had just settled into this neighborhood, brimming with optimism for a new beginning. Yet these limiting policies were already stifling that aspiration. We started to question whether we had erred, if this place could genuinely become our home. The HOA's inflexible and antiquated perspective was impacting more than just us. It was driving away other young families like ours, leaving the community stagnant and aging, devoid of new life and fresh energy to rejuvenate it. It was truly disheartening to witness how their resistance to change was gradually sapping the neighborhood of its vibrant potential. My statement was intended to resonate beyond my own experience. It was for every homeowner exasperated by nonsensical regulations that seemed to lack reason. The regulations set by the HOA had implications beyond my own experience. Their grip on the whole neighborhood was unyielding. In the weeks preceding my coin stunt, I discovered that other families were similarly burdened by the oppressive hold of the HOA. A number of residents I conversed with shared my frustration. Sarah, a mother of 3 living nearby, shared with me the story of how she and her husband faced a fine for creating a garden that strayed from the HOA's approved landscaping guidelines. "We simply sought a place for the children to cultivate vegetables," she remarked, her tone laden with disappointment. Yet, it seems that tomatoes are not permitted by the HOA. It seems as though they desire everything to appear flawless. "Yet what is the price to pay?" she replied, shaking her head. "This was meant to be our eternal sanctuary. Yet we're beginning to question our decision to settle here." Another family, the Garcias, encountered ongoing admonitions for allowing their children to enjoy basketball in their own driveway. "It's absurd," Mr. Garcia expressed during an unexpected dialogue. They envision this neighborhood as a picturesque scene straight from a magazine. Yet in doing so, they're draining its very essence. Children no longer have the freedom to simply enjoy their childhood. Some individuals, on the other hand, appear to have embraced the HOA's authority without any hesitation. The retired couple next door, the Petersons, stood by Karen's unwavering enforcement. Mr. Peterson remarked that she is merely striving to maintain the neighborhood's appeal. "We relocated here for the quality, not to be surrounded by trucks and Teslas everywhere." His wife nodded in agreement, saying, "If you don't like the rules, what made you come here in the first place?" The retirees, the Petersons, who defended the HOA's rules, nonetheless acknowledged that they had been fined for leaving their garbage bins out past 10 a.m. on collection day. "It's simply the way of the world," Mrs. Peterson remarked with a weary shrug. Yet, the strain in her voice revealed the truth behind her words. The discussions revealed a clear division within the community caused by the HOA. Several residents felt a deep sense of dread about voicing their concerns, worried about potential repercussions. Sarah cautioned that she'll discover flaws in your lawn, your mailbox, or anything else. Karen possesses a unique talent for turning life into a challenge for those who dare to cross her path. These narratives highlighted that the HOA was failing to safeguard the neighborhood's essence. It was enforcing compliance through control. It had transcended beyond my personal struggle. This struggle embodied all those who have suffered in silence due to bullying. Karen appeared to be motivated by something deeper than merely upholding the regulations. To some, she appeared as a tyrant intoxicated by authority, yet I had a feeling there was a deeper story behind her actions. Based on my observations, Karen had served as the HOA president for 3 years, and throughout that period, she had developed a reputation for being a perfectionist. Even the slightest departures from the HOA's guidelines were regarded as personal insults. One neighbor remarked with a shrug that she believes she is safeguarding the community. She likely thinks that relaxing the rules will lead to the entire neighborhood unraveling. One could easily picture Karen immersed in the HOA handbook well past midnight, firmly believing that each regulation held the secret to upholding harmony and safeguarding property values. Yet, there were murmurs of an underlying cause for her inflexibility, tales suggesting that Karen had previously confronted a former resident who dared to question her dominance. According to Sarah, he ultimately decided to move out. It seems she perceives each new homeowner as a possible danger now. For Karen, it transcended mere regulations. It was fundamentally about dominance. The Tesla represented more than just a vehicle to her. It stood as a challenge, a bold statement nestled within the carefully crafted landscape of her life. Her determination is almost admirable, though it can be quite exhausting to contend with. The evening prior to the delivery was imbued with a sense of stillness, as if the world held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. The buckets lingered in the corner of the garage, their heft a silent reminder of the countless hours we had invested in them. Transferring a single bucket from the kitchen to the garage proved to be quite the challenge. Each item tipped the scales at over 50 pounds, necessitating the use of a dolly to navigate them safely and avoid any potential back injuries. That morning, as I loaded the buckets into the back of my Tesla, the weight of the task settled in. Beads of perspiration cascaded down my face as I lifted each bucket, my muscles protesting against the exertion. My partner remained supportive, sharing uplifting words as the kids rallied around me, proclaiming me the strongest dad ever, even in the face of physical fatigue. Their joy and enthusiasm fueled my determination to persevere. The irony of employing the same vehicle they had penalized me for to transport the coins was not lost on me. It was impossible not to ponder the absurdity of the situation that had unfolded. As I finally managed to secure the last bucket, the rear of the Tesla appeared on the verge of buckling beneath the load. My partner offered a playful salute. "Go seize the moment," they said with smiles on their faces. I nodded, resolute in my commitment to follow this path to the end. As I arrived at Karen's house, the sun began to emerge from behind the clouds, bathing the tranquil neighborhood in a warm, golden light. I glanced at my wristwatch. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. I arrived at this hour intentionally, both to surprise her and to ensure that the entire neighborhood witnessed the unfolding events. Karen had dedicated years to exercising her influence around the clock, leaving an indelible impact on the lives of those around her. Today, I aim to ensure she experienced the impact of someone arriving at her doorstep, prepared to deliver a message that would linger in her memory. I emerged from the Tesla, inhaled deeply, and pressed the doorbell. The buckets, arranged neatly like soldiers in the back seat, shimmered under the light. Karen opened the door, and for an instant, she stood still, caught in a moment of surprise. Her gaze flicked between me and the buckets, her face shifting through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, unbridled fury. "What is this all about?" she snapped, her voice piercing and incisive. With a smile, I lifted the first bucket and set it down on her doorstep, declaring, "It's my payment, $2,100, exactly as you requested." Karen's face flushed a vibrant crimson. "I can't believe this is happening." She glared, arms crossed defiantly. "This situation is utterly absurd. It's unreasonable to think I could tally all of this." I shrugged, brushing the sweat from my forehead. "The Federal Reserve asserts that coins serve as legal tender for all debts, both public and private. Payment was what you sought. I'm simply adhering to the guidelines." She hesitated, searching for a clever comeback. "This is truly an affront. You're intentionally complicating matters." I rested against the final bucket, my smile growing broader. Amusingly, that's precisely the sentiment I experienced while navigating the HOA. She attempted to make her case, her voice escalating with exasperation as she asserted that the fines were completely warranted, reciting the regulations as if they were holy scriptures. The guidelines set forth by the HOA are designed to maintain the unique charm of the neighborhood. She pressed on, her voice wavering between a patronizing edge and a sense of urgency. If we allow one individual to park wherever they please, where does it stop? The whole community might unravel. She had more to say. Karen, gripping her clipboard tightly, started to reference obscure court cases and cite HOA bylaws, trying to establish her dominance. Her words flowed rapidly, a chaotic mix of reasoning and urgency, as if persuading me could somehow reclaim the grip she sensed was fading. I lingered for a moment, observing her efforts to bolster a system that prioritized strict adherence over the well-being of those it affected. Her arguments, regardless of the fervor with which they were presented, merely reinforced my determination. This was not about maintaining integrity. It revolved around power, and I refused to be just another piece in her strategy. I interrupted her, shaking my head emphatically. Here is my payment, Karen. It's the accepted form of payment, and it's exactly what you requested. My voice remained steady and determined, yet within me, a tempest of feelings swirled. Resistance, fatigue, and, most importantly, a subtle victory. I chose not to wait for her response. This wasn't a discussion, and I had no intention of altering her perspective. With that, I pivoted to make my way back to my Tesla. Karen's calm demeanor shattered. Her hands quivered as she pointed to the buckets, yet silence enveloped her, leaving her unable to speak further. She remained silent, taken aback, while I captured a swift image for proof and made my way back to my Tesla. As I settled into the driver's seat, I cast a look over my shoulder. Karen remained rooted in place, her eyes fixed on the towering pile of coins that had taken over her porch. The view enveloped me in a profound, unmistakable contentment. I activated the Tesla's quiet engine, offered her a subtle wave, and drove off, fully aware that I had conveyed my message. The coin payment was more than just a declaration. It ignited a greater force. In the days and weeks that ensued, neighbors who had previously remained quiet started to voice their thoughts. Initially, it was understated, a brief acknowledgement as I passed, or a soft expression of gratitude for confronting them, murmured at the mailbox. However, before long, an increasing number of residents began to express their frustrations candidly. One evening, Sarah, the mother who had faced a fine for her vegetable garden, came to speak with me. You find yourself in disbelief. It opened our eyes to the fact that we don't have to simply accept things, she said. We've been conversing with several other families, and we're considering taking a stand as well. During the upcoming community gathering, I observed something truly extraordinary. A larger crowd gathered than typical, and they were fully engaged. Once silent residents were now boldly questioning the board, insisting on transparency, and voicing their own grievances. The uprising had not fully erupted, but the initial sparks of transformation were unmistakably taking root. I perceived it as a minor triumph in a broader struggle against the unjust regulations of the HOA. Taking a stand for my beliefs felt empowering, and while my courageous act didn't result in instant, dramatic transformation, I took pride in the subtle waves of impact it generated. The subtle shifts it ignited, community members voicing their concerns, challenging those in power, and advocating for justice, were invaluable. This battle transcended mere monetary penalties. It was about revealing the ridiculousness of the HOA's regulations and demonstrating the lengths to which someone like me would go to make a point. It was a moment to cherish, a testament to how even the tiniest acts of rebellion can ignite something far greater. The issue extended beyond mere fines. It encompassed a far more significant dilemma: how these capricious regulations were stifling the community. A significant number of residents sought transformation, yet the HOA's inflexible regulations and opposition rendered it almost unfeasible to update their antiquated rules. Their obstinacy drove away young families like mine from remaining. There was a moment when I considered relocating, yet the prospect of selling the house so quickly would have brought about significant capital gains taxes. Despite settling the fines and sharing my account, the lingering bitterness from the experience remained with me. For months, it felt as though nothing shifted. The HOA's regulations continued to be as rigid as always, and I still found myself unable to park my Tesla in the driveway. Yet, an unexpected turn of events unfolded. Approximately 3 months after I settled my $2,100 fine in coins, the repercussions from that day started to unfold in unexpected ways. Initially, there was silence from Karen and the HOA. As the months slipped away in quietude, I found myself believing they were exerting every effort to sidestep the reality of what had transpired. Then, one day, a letter appeared in the mailbox. Enclosed was a check for $71, accompanied by a note indicating that I had overpaid my fine. I found myself bursting into laughter for a full minute. It was evident they had reluctantly accepted my payment, despite the immense inconvenience it had caused them. Shortly after the incident with the coin payment, the HOA revealed their decision to change management companies. While no official explanation was provided, the timing seemed far too coincidental to ignore. The previous management company was actively engaged in the email correspondence regarding my fines and evidently found it challenging to deal with Karen's excessively strict application of the rules. It appeared that my action had revealed some weaknesses in their structure. Regrettably, the new management company did not bring the revitalizing change the neighborhood anticipated. They came in with assurances of enhanced professionalism, yet swiftly demonstrated an eagerness to impose the same vexing rules, if not with greater fervor. Their refined strategy did not soften the grip of the policies, and for numerous residents, the irritation only intensified. It was evident that although Karen's position had been challenged, the struggle for genuine transformation was just beginning. However, in spite of their efforts to assert dominance, Karen's role as president did not go unscathed. In the weeks after my coin payment stunt, murmurs began to spread throughout the neighborhood. A few residents started to openly challenge her choices, inspired by my position. What's the reason behind us being fined for items such as basketball hoops and tomato plants? A neighbor inquired during a tense HOA meeting. Others began to voice their own complaints, transforming what was once a carefully managed setting into a symphony of discontent. Karen's grip on the board started to falter. As the situation developed, I persisted in parking my Tesla in my driveway each day, completely disregarding the HOA's regulations. It absolutely drove my Karen HOA president up the wall, but I was unfazed. This was my space, and I refused to let anyone dictate where I could or couldn't park. Consequently, even with the coin stunt that undoubtedly rattled them, the HOA remained steadfast. Shortly thereafter, another letter arrived from the HOA, notifying me that I was once more in violation of their regulations for parking my Tesla in the driveway. This time, I completely overlooked them. A month later, the HOA called for a community meeting to tackle ongoing issues, and I chose to attend, sporting a t-shirt that proclaimed, "Karen hates Teslas." Upon my arrival, fellow residents who were aware of my struggles with the HOA expressed their admiration for my t-shirt. The meeting was utterly ridiculous. The members of the HOA board engaged in lengthy discussions over minor issues, such as the permissibility of solar panels. I endured the whole experience, anticipating the moment when they would eventually mention my Tesla. When the subject finally emerged, I uncovered an essential piece of information. The HOA was permitted to impose fines solely upon receiving an official report of the violation from a neighbor. What's particularly intriguing is that, as the individual facing the fine, I possessed the right to request and examine those reports. This piece of information seemed to shift the entire narrative. It provided me with an advantage and revealed that the HOA wasn't as invincible as they wished us to think. This time, I chose to stand my ground instead of simply paying the fine again. In that very meeting, I asked for a copy of the report that resulted in the fine, as their regulations indicated I had the right to know who had filed the complaint against me. It was to be expected that I wouldn't receive a reply. They appeared reluctant to disclose the identity of those responsible for the complaints. Following the meeting, several neighbors came up to express their gratitude for my willingness to voice my thoughts and maintain my position. During our conversation, they conveyed their thoughts on the meeting and noted that the board members appeared to be particularly tense. There were whispers that the HOA could be anxious about possible legal actions from residents concerning these stringent regulations. A neighbor shared that they've heard of comparable situations in other states where homeowners triumphed in lawsuits against HOAs for overstepping their bounds. A smile crept across my face at the thought. I hadn't intended to pursue legal action on my own, Yet it became evident that the board was under significant pressure. The thought of advocating for a change in the HOA's bylaws to permit vehicles in driveways did occur to me. Achieving this would necessitate gathering more than 100 signatures from homeowners in the community. An intimidating yet achievable challenge. For a fleeting instant, I contemplated initiating the journey, envisioning the sensation of unraveling one of their most capricious regulations. Ultimately, I chose not to proceed with it. While it would have been gratifying to advocate for such a substantial shift, I came to understand that my position had already resonated. The seeds of defiance had taken root, and I was no longer burdened with the struggle by myself. At times, merely demonstrating to others that transformation can occur is sufficient to initiate progress. During the upcoming election for HOA leadership, an extraordinary event unfolded. A number of residents contested our Karen HOA president. It was evident that individuals were weary of her inflexible rules and domineering demeanor. On the evening the election results were revealed, it was declared that Karen had been defeated in her bid for HOA president. Her expression, typically one of self-satisfied control, revealed her surprise as the applause for her successor resonated throughout the space. Even after losing her title, Karen made an effort to keep her presence felt by attending every HOA meeting and expressing her views with vigor. Yet her words held diminished significance now, overshadowed by a community weary of being muted. My coin stunt wasn't the sole reason for her downfall. The neighborhood, weary of her dominance, reached a unanimous conclusion. The Petersons, the elderly couple who had consistently supported Karen's stringent policies, were strikingly silent following her downfall. During the upcoming community meeting, I noticed them seated towards the back. Their typical self-assured demeanor now softened into something more reserved. Could it have been remorse? Shame? It was difficult to discern. Following the meeting, I encountered them while heading to the parking lot. Mr. Peterson halted my progress, his hands awkwardly tucked into the confines of his jacket pockets. You know, he started, clearing his throat, we've been reflecting deeply on all that has transpired. Mrs. Peterson nodded, her eyes cast downward, lost in thought. We believed we were acting correctly. Upholding the guidelines, she murmured gently. Perhaps we concentrated too much on the concept of order, overlooking the ways in which those rules were causing harm to individuals. Her words took me by surprise. These were the very individuals who previously reprimanded me for challenging the HOA, and now they were conceding that they might have erred. Mr. Peterson went on to say, we've called this place home for 20 years. It has consistently been serene, and we believed Karen was merely striving to maintain that tranquility. Yet, it seems we overlooked just how far it had progressed. After a moment of silence, Mrs. Peterson continued, what you did prompted reflection. Perhaps it's time to embrace some transformation in the neighborhood, to allow individuals to navigate their own paths without constant guidance on every detail. Their words lingered in my mind long after I had returned home. It wasn't a complete apology, but it was a step in the right direction. An acknowledgement that unwavering loyalty to regulations may not always lead to the most favorable outcomes. The subtle transition of the Petersons reflected the broader transformation occurring within the community. Individuals started to recognize that maintaining one's essence didn't necessitate suppressing uniqueness or ignoring injustice. Reflecting on the experience, it was a blend of amusement and fatigue, yet ultimately rewarding. I felt a sense of satisfaction in my decision and wouldn't alter a single detail. I believed it was a declaration that had to be expressed. The narrative highlighted the importance of advocating for one's beliefs, regardless of the issue's magnitude, illustrating that even the smallest actions can create an impact, if only to affirm a stance. Reflecting on the experience, I came to understand that it had transformed me in ways I never anticipated. Initially, I believed I was merely advocating for my right to choose where to park my vehicle. However, as the weeks progressed, I began to perceive the struggle as something far more significant. A struggle for respect, uniqueness, and the liberty to exist without incessant observation. One evening, while I was settled in the living room, my eldest approached and nestled onto the couch next to me. Father, they mentioned, Their tone was strikingly grave. What is the reasoning behind the creation of nonsensical rules? I took a moment, sifting through my thoughts for the perfect expression. At times, I remarked with a measured tone, individuals believe that regulations will improve situations. Yet, they overlook the fact that rules are meant to assist individuals, not to cause them harm. They nodded with contemplation, then inquired, "Did you engage in battle because of us?" The inquiry struck me with more intensity than I had anticipated. To some extent, I conceded. I stood my ground to demonstrate that it's important to advocate for what is just, even in challenging times. I wanted you to realize that it's okay to question things that seem illogical. Your voice matters, and you have the power to create change. They embraced me warmly, and for the first time in weeks, a wave of tranquility washed over me. This extended beyond the Tesla and the HOA. It was about instilling in my children the significance of perseverance, the necessity of challenging what seems off, and the bravery to stand firm when needed. The unwavering support from my family during the ordeal served as a poignant reminder of what truly holds significance. The evenings dedicated to arranging the coins, the joyful sounds of my children, and the serene instances of togetherness with my partner revealed the depth of our connection. This transcended mere concerns of a vehicle or a homeowners association. It was about supporting one another and instilling in my children the value of resilience and the strength to remain steadfast in the face of injustice. I discovered something new about myself. I had always seen myself as a person who steers clear of conflict, someone who prefers to maintain harmony rather than stir the waters. This experience revealed that there are times when one must stand firm, not out of malice, but out of conviction. Occasionally, a simple act of rebellion can motivate others to follow suit. If you are passionate about advocating for justice and wish to witness more narratives like this, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Each day, we unveil astonishing tales of Karen HOA encounters that you simply cannot overlook. Your encouragement is invaluable to us. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you in the next installment.